Welcome. Congratulations on your leadership position in housing and residence life. My name is Charlotte Strickland. I'm the Director of Professional Development and Training at the University of Central Arkansas. And I look forward to spending this next hour with you as we talk about the incredible subject matter of diversity. Congratulations on your position. What an opportunity that you have to impact lives and learn from other people. You're about to begin a course on the very important topic of diversity. It's a journey of understanding and appreciating differences. Navigating diversity is a skill set, and it's an ongoing process. This course is going to assist in educating you, the student staff, on the professional and respectful way to treat people of all different backgrounds and all walks of life. The main goal of a successful diversity course is to educate, equip, and encourage participants so that we may all do our part to create an inclusive campus and a positive campus environment. I hope this course will do all three of those things for you as we go through these particular slides. So let's get started. First of all, what is diversity? Well, I use this particular definition that's quite easy to understand. Diversity is recognizing and valuing the similarities and the differences that are identified in others and that make each person unique. On UCA's campus, we are surrounded by individuals, and all of these individuals create differences. However, we're also surrounded by individuals who are similar to us. It's very important as student staff to be aware of both and to develop relationships with those in our buildings, in our classrooms, and the extracurricular activities that we take part in. So seize this time to lean in and to learn. I tell students all the time that never again in your life will you be surrounded by so many people that are different. So take advantage of these opportunities to have conversations, to attend programs, to ask learning questions, and to really expand your education and your experiences when it comes to being with other people. So what do we expect you to learn today? Well, the learning outcomes for student staff are several. To be able to demonstrate an understanding of relationships between diversity, inequality, social and economic status. To be able to demonstrate an understanding of differences in your residences, in the peers that you're surrounded by, and to be able to respect and value the differences. You may not agree, but you can still agree to disagree and respect in the midst of that. To critically examine your own attitudes about diversity, about different groups of people, and to help you identify your own personal biases. We don't like to admit it, but every one of us have biases. And some of those are very deeply embedded and we're not really aware of them until there's an issue or a problem. To consider perspectives of diverse groups because there's going to be many perspectives that you're going to be exposed to on this campus. And then to help determine reasonable discussions and decisions as you try to navigate not only your feelings but the feelings of your residents. To be able to communicate effectively, to express your thoughts and your ideas, and to put diversity practices to action by promoting social justice and inclusion. And then to be able to promote diversity, to be a diversity advocate on our campus. And you do this inside the residence halls, in your classrooms, in the various activities that you're involved in throughout the University of Central Arkansas campus. So when we talk about diversity, what's very natural for us is that we tend to go toward and to hang around people that look like us, sound like us, and that's human nature. It's not something we should feel guilty about. It's perfectly natural. But one of the goals of diversity, especially as a student staff member, is to be intentional and to allow yourselves to interact with and develop relationships with people that are different from you. They may talk different, act different, come from a different part of the country or a different part of the world, have different interests or hobbies. But this is how personal growth happens. And this is how we're impacted as we expand our lens, or as I call it, our cultural filter. So let's talk about that. when it comes to each one of us on college campus and each one of us that conducts themselves in the world, we each have a multitude of personal identities. For example, as I'm talking to you, I would identify myself as far as gender identity as a female. I would identify myself as a Caucasian. I would identify myself as middle-aged, as a parent, as a hiker. These are just different identities that make up who I am. And you'll see a multitude of these categories on this particular screen. How would you identify yourself when it comes to your age, your gender identity, your spirituality, or your personality? Maybe you're extroverted, or maybe you're more introverted. Hobbies or interests when it comes to your identity. Are you a runner? Are you a musician? You know, how would you describe yourself to other people? All of these identities collectively create the person that you are. So it's very, very important as a college student, and especially on our campus, that people are affirmed for their identities, that they're appreciated for their identities. So I want you to think about, how would you define yourself to other people? And do you feel good about those identities? Are you proud of those identities? I love to do this particular exercise with students because as I walk around the room and hear them describe themselves, there's laughter, there's smiles. Usually a story accompanies the identity of why that particular identity is important to them. Because people feel special when they talk about all of the different things that collectively make them who they are. So I want you right now just to spend a minute or two and think about which one of these that you see is extremely important to you and stands out to you. Maybe there's an identity that's very important to you, but it's not listed on this screen, because these are just a few that I thought of. There's certainly a multitude of other types of identity. One example may be military. Maybe you were raised in the military or currently serve in the military, and that's an identity you strongly identify with. That's not necessarily up here, but it's part of who you are. Over the years when I've done this exercise, I've had and heard a multitude of different ways that people describe themselves. So it's very important that you feel comfortable and that you're able to identify who you are. And now here's the thing. As a staff leader in the residence halls, it's extremely important that you affirm your residents for who they are, that you ask learning questions, that you create opportunities for casual conversations where they get to talk about who they are. And when they share who they are, they're not laughed at, they're not mocked, they're not made fun of, they're affirmed. In fact, when they share an identity and a story, it just continues the conversation. There's further questions. Well, tell me more about that, or how did that come about? Then that person starts to feel special. That person starts to feel appreciated. And that's how we want our residents to feel on this campus. That leads to what we call the concept of inclusion, where people are here and feel included. They feel a part of this great institution. So it's a wonderful opportunity for you as a leader in the residence hall to start to identify the multitude of identities within your residence hall, and then to affirm those residents for who they are and what they bring to this campus as well as your residence hall. The second thing about identities that I love, and it's very, very interesting, is based on your identities, those identities go and contribute to creating a cultural filter. So what do I mean by that? Well, based on who you are, that's how you see the world. So think of it as a pair of glasses that you put on some glasses, and those glasses are based on your age. Those glasses are based on the fact that you're a college student. Maybe that you're an extrovert. Maybe that you identify your gender identity as male. All of those things contribute to how you see the world, how you see other people, how you respond to issues or concerns. So it's very, very important to realize not only do you have these multiple identities, but your identities, the stories that go behind those, the experiences, all of those things create a lens in which you see the world. And that is extremely important when you live in a residence hall and you're dealing with a multitude of people, because some people, Let me just give you an example. You could take your residents out to see a movie, and you watch the same movie, but after you leave the movie, some people hate it, some people thought it was challenging, some people thought it was the best movie they've ever seen. In fact, they want to download it or purchase it. You all saw the movie, but you have a variety of responses to that movie. That's because your lens are all different. And people's stories and experiences go into how they respond to what it is they just saw or what it is they heard. It's very important for you to recognize this, because you're going to have residents that will respond to issues or personalities of your residents or different things that are occurring on campus. They're going to respond in a multitude of ways. You need to understand that those responses are based on each individual's filter. So make sure that you identify yours and realize why your lens goes off on certain things. But ask yourself and ask your residents learning questions. Why does this get you so upset? What is it about this that's hurtful to you? Or has there been an experience in your life? Or do you have a story of what is so upsetting about this particular comment or this particular incident on campus? That's when you start to hear from these individuals the importance of an identity and how that identity creates the filter in which they respond to people around them. These two things are so important in creating the foundation of trust in your residence hall and also helping you understand your residents. So this is where I always start when it comes to diversity, and that is trying to understand the perspective of all of the people around you and then being respectful of all of those perspectives. So moving on, here's some other things to really think about as you begin your leadership position. One of them is be aware. Look around. Man, when you enter that residence hall, you are surrounded by people that look different, sound different, act different, and they're bringing all of their identities with them to that residence hall. Some of them will be from small rural towns. In fact, some of them will be from cities or towns that are smaller than the university itself. So just walking on this campus is nerve-wracking, overwhelming. They are fearful of everything because they've never been in such a large atmosphere before. Others will walk on like they've been here forever, and they feel at ease from the moment they walk on, maybe because of the size and because of where they're coming from. Maybe there will be individuals that walk in your residence hall that have never seen another person of another race. And all of a sudden they're exposed to that, and they're not quite sure how to navigate that. So you need to have your antennas up from day one and be very aware of all of your residents and how they're responding to one another, and where you see tension or where you see stress or where you see your residents are somewhat uncomfortable. Be the bridge. Walk right up. Try to pull people together. Create casual conversations so that this strange person that's standing across from me or down the hall from me all of a sudden becomes a person with a name. All of a sudden becomes someone who's real and someone who's kind, someone who's different, but yet someone who's very similar to me as we begin a conversation. You know, there's a number of ways. Some things that you can see, obviously, as far as demographics and identities, but there's also things you can't see. Maybe it's a student's socioeconomic status. You know, we've got some students that come, they have their own vehicles, they have their ability to purchase meals outside of their meal plan. Maybe you're going to have a residence that's literally living day by day. They don't have transportation. So we need to be careful about assumptions that we make, because some things we can't see. We just assume everybody is alike, and that's not necessarily the case. I recently worked with a student who was a leader on our college campus, and I had a dinner over at my home, and I told everybody, come on over for dinner, I'll see you at 6. And a little bit later after the meeting, the student pulled me aside and was quite shy and embarrassed and basically said, I don't have a way to get to your house. You know, it was very, I felt really bad about it, and it was awkward for him. And then I immediately apologized. You see, I made the assumption that every student had a vehicle, every student had transportation. And I learned a valuable lesson is I never need to make these assumptions about our students and just assume that everybody's the same. So I took care of it, made sure that he had a way to get to my home. And I've now learned anytime I invite somebody over, in fact, I've got a couple of students coming over dinner Thursday night. The first thing I said to them yesterday was, do you have a way to get to my house? If not, I'll come pick you up at this particular time. So these are all learning points, and you're going to be in the midst of learning as you deal with diversity. There's no magic formula. There's no time that you arrive, and once you arrive here, you have everything figured out. There's no such thing of that as in diversity. Sometimes these conversations are awkward. Sometimes you are going to mess up. I mess up all the time. But it's much better to mess up and be in the midst of the mess of diversity than never allow yourself to be around people that are different. So be aware, have those antennas up, and really look at the people in your residence hall and try to pull people together in the midst of all of those differences. The next thing I would say is to be yourself, and this is huge. If you're comfortable in your own skin, if you know who you are, if you make no apologies for your identity groups, and you're comfortable with that, it makes a huge impression on your residents. It feeds into their confidence. If they see that you're comfortable with who you are and how you identify, then they'll follow your lead and be comfortable about who they are. Diversity is all about affirming yourself as a person and affirming others for who they are and their identities. You know, one of the saddest things I see on a college campus is when students come and in order to, quote, fit in, they assimilate. They start to blend in. And that's sad. If we all blend in, we've lost the incredible opportunity we have to learn from one another. So make it your goal that your residents aren't blending in order to fit in. Make it your goal that they stand out based on their identities, that they're who they are, that they bring all of themselves to your residence hall and to this campus. You know, a very famous academician named Dr. Seuss had a great quote that's one of my favorites. It's, be who you are. Those who mind don't matter, and those who matter don't mind. There is so much truth to that. And you want to model that to your residents, that they're going to be respected for who they are and for the identities that they bring in. You know, why do we blend in order to fit in? We're afraid. We're afraid that if we share identity, we're not going to be accepted, that we're going to be mocked. Some of us have been harassed because of our identities. So it creates a great deal of stress and vulnerability. That's why it's so important for you to model respect to your students, and so that other students will model that. And certainly if you witness harassment, that you speak up and that you stand up for your residents and do what you can to minimize any form of negative behavior as well. So being yourself is critical in setting a foundation of trust so that people can feel comfortable for who they are. Another thing to think of is to be honest. I mentioned this earlier, all of us have a cultural filter. Another word for that is just a personal bias. If you're breathing, you have biases. And these are those internal thoughts about a group of people or an individual. And they're internal, they're deeply embedded, and they're in there because of something we've experienced before we came to college in our earlier life. Maybe they're embedded because we've been taught by a family member, are taught by someone that's had influenced us earlier in our lives. And those deeply embedded biases will come out when there's a problem, when there's an issue, when we're conflicted with somebody else. So it's extremely important for us to identify our biases. And then when we see them, the good, the bad, the ugly, we really need to sit in them. We need to reflect on them. We need to ask ourselves questions. Where did that come from? Is this fair? Am I treating people differently because of this bias? Because of this bias, am I being respectful or disrespectful to someone else? Man, what do I need to learn from this experience? I can give you an example of a bias that I had that I never knew I had until it came out one day. I recently went to the dentist. I don't like to go to the dentist. I have a dentist phobia. It's just something I dread. And when I went to this dentist, it was a new dentist because my other dentist had passed away. And I had gone to the same dentist for years. So I'm already nervous about having a new dentist and then being at the dentist in the first place. Well, the dentist enters the room. It's a young man, and to be honest, which we're talking about, he looks like he's 14. He's extremely young looking. So he starts to look at my mouth, and then in the midst of the conversation, he lets it be known that I'm going to have a complicated procedure. Well, that shoots my anxiety up and makes me even more nervous, and he starts talking about the procedure. And without thinking, I looked straight at him and said, "Have you done this before?" Immediately, I could tell that this man was offended. I had offended him because of his profession, his skill set, and his ability to do what he was telling me that needed to be done. Well, what I didn't realize, and the minute I said it, I did then, was that I had a very deep-seated bias about his age. And I was questioning his ability to do what he said he could do based on the fact that he was young, much younger than me and much younger than I thought a dentist should be. That's an example of a hidden bias, and unfortunately, it was verbalized. It came out in my behavior and in my conversation. And once I saw his body language and his response, I knew immediately that I had offended him and been disrespectful. So what did I do? I apologized. I told him I was sorry. I explained to him that I had a dentist phobia and that I was already highly anxious just being in his office. But I told him I meant no disrespect for him and that obviously he is a professional and he knows what he's doing, that I just needed time to think about the procedure. We went on to have a great conversation, and since then, we have a great relationship. I still don't like to go to the dentist, but I value him and I respect him for what he is, for what it is that he does. So you really need to think, are there certain groups of people or populations of people that I just somewhat feel uncomfortable about? I've been taught that this group of people is hateful, is unkind, is immoral. What have you been taught? I guarantee you that when coming to a college campus, you are going to be challenged on things that you've been taught or the things that you've experienced all your life. And that's okay. Part of college is questioning. Part of college is reflecting on what it is that you're bringing with you and assessing, is this good? Is this bad? You don't have to change everything, but I will guarantee you, I will suggest to you that some things will change just based on exposure and conversations and learning about different groups of people. So be honest with yourself. It's a very, very important. And once again, this is something that you model to your residents. What else is there to think about? Be a part of the team. Wow, what a great opportunity for you to be a part of Housing and Residence Life. This department on our campus is excellent. Wonderful leaders, great educational tools, great resources that are provided year-round to develop you as a person. I commend you for taking on the responsibility of this position. And I will tell you this, when you get ready to graduate from the University of Central Arkansas and you have multiple interviews, you're going to do an exceptional job, because when those employers ask you questions about skills, you're going to be able to respond that you've learned about conflict resolution and arbitration, that you've learned how to be a good communicator, that you've learned how to be inclusive, that you've learned how to be a leader in the midst of chaos. There are so many skills that you're going to learn by being a staff member. So I commend you on that. So as you come to campus and as you seek your position and what it is that you want to do in that particular position, seek opportunities amongst your colleagues, amongst your mentors that you're going to create on this campus. Ask them learning questions. Ask them how they navigated challenges. Ask yourself, what do I have to contribute to the team? Because you do. You are on the team because of your skill set, your personality. Something was seen in you, one of your many identities that said, we want this person to be part of the Housing and Residence Life team. So make sure that you don't sit the bench. Make sure that you jump in. Even if you're vulnerable or fearful, that's part of growth. That's part of leadership. It's better to just jump in and give it your all and learn as you go than being hesitant and keeping yourself from growing and learning. You're going to be surrounded by similarities and differences on the team as well as within your residence hall. So learn from one another as you're given an opportunity. I guess that kind of leads into this one, and that is to be a risk taker. You know, some people are very nervous about interacting with anybody that's different from them because it is nerve-wracking. You feel vulnerable. You're scared you're going to offend somebody. You're scared that you may make somebody angry. You're scared that you may say the wrong thing. Can I tell you that in interacting with different people all my life, I've done all of the above? I have made mistakes. Sadly, I have made people angry, or I have made them feel offended. It's not what you're doing, it's how you respond to what it is that you're doing. And if you note that all of the above has happened, the first thing you say is, I apologize. That was not my intent. My intent is to learn. My intent is to grow. And I think the majority of people that know your intent and the majority of the people that hear your apology will respect the fact that you are trying to reach out and that you are trying to grow. So I challenge you to enter in these daily conversations and to try new things with your residents, with your colleagues and peers in the Housing and Residence Life Department. All of these conversations, although nerve-wracking, they're going to help you better understand your residents. They're going to expand your cultural filter and your lens. They're going to help you grow. But just know that in growing, there are always risks involved. I always tell people when I start a diversity seminar, a diversity class, diversity is messy. It is just messy. And then sometimes in the middle of a conversation with someone, when you think you're really doing good, you'll blow it. And that's just part of the conversation. The main thing is that you keep the conversation going. And so many times I've made a mess, but I've kept going. And by the time I pull back from the table or shake hands with that individual or go get a soda with that individual after that difficult conversation, our relationship is even deeper. Our respect for one another is greater because we're both working at understanding one another. So I challenge you, it's much better to be in the midst of mess and diversity than to sit in your corner, to only expose yourself to people who think like you, respond like you, look like you. You know, that's kind of boring. It's also minimizing all the opportunities that you have on this campus to learn and to really develop as a leader. So take those risks. And if you do mess up, learn to say you're sorry. Learn to ask questions. I tell people all the time, the foundation for diversity is curiosity. Be curious about people. Ask learning questions. You know, I've never met anybody from Saudi Arabia. What kind of things do you eat? Tell me how you were raised. Tell me about your school system there. Or, you know, I've never been to Piggott, Arkansas. Where is that? Or, you know, I've always been interested in vegetarians. Tell me more about how that impacts your life on a daily basis. And does it impact your life here on campus? So many different things that we can ask questions about to expand our lens. So be a risk taker. Another thing I want to say about being a risk taker is that when you take risk, it makes a huge statement to your residents because your residents are watching you. If they see you take a risk, they're more willing to take a risk. If they see you screw up and keep going, it emboldens them to do the same. They also will realize that all of this could possibly involve mistakes and that that's just part of the learning process. So model to your residents as well. Be an active learner. Man, when you come to campus, you're going to hear so many different acronyms, so many different abbreviations, whether that's for a building on campus, for a registered student organization, which is called an RSO. There are going to be so many things. And you know, so many times when we hear terms or different things we don't understand, we just gloss over it and nod and act like we know, because we don't want to be embarrassed and be the one that raises their hand or butts in the conversation and says, excuse me, what is that? Well, I encourage you to be the one to butt in and say, what is that? Be an active learner. Initiate by asking questions. Don't just go along to get along, and keep yourself from learning things. You're going to have residents and you yourself that may come on campus and hear LGBTQIA. And you're like, what in the world? Some people don't even know what LGBT stands for. So it's important if somebody says, what exactly is that? Then in a non-condescending tone, in a very non-judgmental tone, or without smirking or mocking the person in any way, just turning to them and saying, wow, thanks for asking that, because that's an important population on our campus. If you hear that term, that could be somebody who identifies as lesbian or gay or bisexual or a transgender individual or a questioning individual, intersex or an asexual. We have all of these individuals on our campus. I'll be glad to introduce you to someone who is openly identified in that category if you want to learn more about that person, because they do a great deal to contribute to our campus culture. What a great way to educate people to be inclusive, to expand their lens. It's the same thing if somebody asks about a Muslim, Jewish, Hindu, Christian on campus, because maybe somebody's coming to our campus and not been exposed to the variety of individuals on our campus who identify very strongly when it comes to the spiritual aspect of their life. So being an active learner is extremely important. It may be meeting a veteran for the first time. It may be asking about different resources on campus for different populations. Asking about Title IX. So there are a number of things that you're going to be exposed to on campus, and you're not going to know everything about everything. The Housing and Residence Life Department does an incredible job with training. And I'm sure going through all of these modules, in addition to coming on campus and going through all of those trainings, you are going to be full of information. But even then, there will be gaps. So when there are those gaps, ask learning questions. Don't be embarrassed to say, I don't know this, but I want to know this. Extremely important to be an active learner. I recently was at a picnic and sitting next to an international student. She was from France. And we were sitting there eating our hamburgers, and they'd handed out different packages of chips. And she leaned over to me and she said, excuse me, can you tell me what a Cheetos is? And I looked at her and had this quizzitive look, and I'm like, what in the world is a cheese toss? But I kind of smiled at her and I said, can you say that again? What did you ask me? And she said, what is a cheese toss? Well, I looked down and I had a package of Cheetos. Now, for me, I know to call it Cheetos, and I've grown up on Cheetos. The orange things that when you eat them, it gets all over your fingers, but man, they taste great. Well, she chuckled, and I said, you know what? We pronounce this Cheeto, and you'll hear Cheetos. I said, you want to try one? So I gave her a Cheeto. She chewed on it, looked at me, and I said, well, what do you think? And she said, well, only if I was very, very hungry would I ask for another one. So we had a great laugh about that, and it was fascinating just having a conversation about Cheetos. What an opportunity to build a relationship with someone, and it's centered around something very, very simple. I'm going to tell you, you're going to have so many of those opportunities, casual conversations, where you can educate people around you, but where you can also learn from people around you. That also gets to the next thing that I'd like you to think about, and that is be alert to hidden disabilities. hidden identities. You're going to be talking face to face, and there are some things about people, their identities, that you'll be able to tell just by looking at them. But there are so many identities that are below the surface. There are also disabilities that are below the surface. Recently, I took a group of students to New Orleans for service learning, where we did community service projects. It was an alternative spring break for UCA students that wanted to go somewhere and serve a community and help. So we were in the city of New Orleans for a week, and it was a great week. The very first morning, as we climbed up onto the chartered bus that took us to New Orleans, our bus driver looked straight at me and wrote something on paper basically saying that he had a hearing impairment and that I needed to face him directly as I spoke, and spoke very slow and clear so that he could read my lips. Now, if he hadn't shared that with me when I climbed onto that bus, I never would have known, because looking at him, I would have made the assumption that he could hear. So looking at him, there was nothing visible that told me otherwise. He was professional, he was direct, he communicated exactly what he needed from me in order for us to achieve in communication. So as a staff member in your residence hall, be aware that when you're looking at someone, there's a lot about that person that you don't necessarily see. They're going to trust you as you develop a relationship with them, and some of those non-visible identities will start to be shared. Hopefully, any hidden disabilities, you will make it known that they are to come to you at any time if they need to be directed to resources. We have a disability resource center here on campus. They do an incredible job in helping individuals that have all sorts of disabilities, some of them visible, some of them not so visible. Recently, I was doing a diversity seminar, and I had a student come up afterwards who shared with me that he was a veteran, that he had fought in 2 different wars before he came back to college, and that he suffers from PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, once again, looking at him, I never would have known it. But he went on to tell me that because of PTSD, he has to sit in certain places in the room. He never puts his back to a door. If something is loud or makes a sudden movement, if someone makes a sudden movement, he will jerk or move quickly. And all of this falling back on his training as a soldier and the experiences that he had had in war. Once he shared that with me, we had a great conversation about his experiences and about the special identity that he had as a veteran. But it also alerted me to his hidden disability with PTSD. So look for opportunities through these casual conversations to learn about your residents. If you're alerted to any hidden disabilities, to point them to the Disability Resource Center or to assist them with any needs that they may have. These personal battles can make a huge difference in the success of their collegiate experience, and you want to do everything that you can to help them be successful. So they could be struggling or dealing with personal battles, and this is where you have a great opportunity to enter and make a difference. Well, I know we've talked a great deal, and I want to end with this one because it's extremely important. And I've mentioned this throughout this seminar, and that's be an example. One of my favorite quotes that I tell people all the time is that people do what people see. So it's extremely important that you're an example to your residents. If they see you treat other people with respect, no matter their size, weight, appearance, race, ethnicity, age, any of that and more, they're going to follow suit. They're going to be impressed. They're going to remember. So you want to model to your residents the aspect of respect, the way that you acknowledge and celebrate all of the differences within your residence hall. If they overhear your conversations where you're asking learning questions, when you're leaning in with curiosity, wanting to know more about that particular person, it sets them up to do the same thing. It sets them up to want to model that behavior. So I challenge you, do not minimize the opportunity that you have to be an example to your residents when it comes to inclusion, when it comes to celebrating the diversity within your residence hall. Wow, what an opportunity you have to impact the people that you come in contact with and to impact all of those that are watching you. So utilize that opportunity of leadership to do that. So moving on, I have an exercise for you. And this is a fun exercise, and it's just to get you thinking once again about your different identities. So I'm hoping that in your folder you saw this particular handout, and I'm hoping that you downloaded it and that you were able to print this out, because I need you to find a pen or a pencil to have a copy of this particular exercise in front of you, and I'm going to give you instructions what I'd like you to do with this. So if you need to print it, pause where we are right now and run out and get you a pen and pencil and make sure that you print it. This is an exercise that I do quite a bit with different organizations on campus because it's talking about the layers of diversity. And this is another word for that would be identities of diversity. These are just some of those identities that we talked about earlier. So basically, here's what I want you to do. The next slide gives you directions. I'll go to that, where it's going to tell you different things to do, okay? So you have that, and it's also on the bottom of your handout. So I'm going to go back to this. So I want you to look at this diagram, and as you look at it, I want you to circle 5 words on this diagram, 5 identities, because that's what they are, that have the most impact on how you think right now in this stage of life, because this changes over time. So right now, when you're thinking about getting ready and going to college, what's predominant in your mind right now? Is it your age? Maybe it's your physical ability. Maybe it's your educational background and what you're bringing to college. So it could be in any of these layers. Maybe it's your personality. You're really thinking a lot about who you are and how you interact with other people. So your personality is in the forefront right now. So you could circle personality. You could circle something in the green ring, something in the yellow ring, or something in the red ring. The green is those internal things, okay? Your race, your ethnicity. The yellow ring is more about things that you're exposed to, maybe geographic location, where you're coming from. Are you coming from a small town, a big city? Are you coming from the South? Maybe you're coming from another part of the United States, the Midwest or the Southeast. So where you're coming from geographically has a big difference on how you identify with yourself or with other people. Maybe you're very in tune right now to your appearance and wondering how people will respond to that. What's recreational habits? Recreational habits is maybe you're a runner. Maybe you're a golfer. What are things that you do in your spare time that are extremely important to you? Personal habits are things that other people or yourself may identify with you. Maybe the fact that you're a smoker. Maybe the fact that you're a partier or a drinker is a personal habit. That you're a vegetarian or vegan. Those are personal decisions that you've made that you associate with personally. The red ring is more about organization. So if you're working somewhere, you'll see in the yellow ring like work experience. Maybe you're currently working at a Chick-fil-A, and so that's very predominant right now, is getting as much money as you can before you go up to college, or maybe transferring that work experience to here in Conway while you come to school. So work experiences is, are you strongly identifying right now where it is you're working? Then when we get to that outer ring is at work. Is the location accessible? Is it challenging? Seniority, have you been there for years? Maybe you've worked through high school and post-high school, so you've been there a long time and you've worked up through the ranks and you've have quite a deal of respect amongst your peers. So all of those rings and the different things in the red ring are kind of about how you feel about your work, and is that predominant at this particular time in your life. So you're circling 5 things in those 3 rings that you would say are predominant and on your mind right now as you think about coming to college and as you think about starting this leadership position. And then I want you to think about, why did you choose those 5? Are they because you're excited about taking those 5 identities to UCA? Maybe you're thinking about 1 or 2 of those because you're nervous. Maybe one of the 5 that you circled is your sexual orientation, and you're wondering, am I going to be accepted? How is this going to be handled or received when I go to college? Maybe it's not sexual orientation. Maybe it's your religion in that yellow. And you're wondering how you're going to navigate your belief system on a college campus. So maybe one of the things that you circled and one of your reasons is a little bit of anxiety or apprehension of knowing how that particular identity is going to flesh out when it comes to college. Now, here's a very interesting question. When you look at the 5 that you circled, how many are visible? How many could I visibly see based on the 5 that you circled? And then, how many are not visible? This always creates a fascinating conversation, because most of the time when we're talking about our identities and what's so important to us, it is just eye-opening to realize so many times the things that are most important to us are invisible, are things that other people have no idea unless they start a conversation. Let that be a learning point for you as a leader, that so many things that are important to your residents are not going to be visible. Therefore, it is key, it is critical for you to develop relationship so that conversations can occur, so that they trust you to start to tell you about those identities and what's important to them. I'd also ask you this question. Of the 5 that you circled, how many of those are going to impact your work in the residence hall? How many of those are going to impact your work in the classroom to help you excel academically? And how many of those 5 impact your life now and later? This is just a great exercise to think, what is in the forefront of your mind right now? What is in the forefront as far as what's important to you? And once again, no apologies. Everybody answers this differently. Everybody responds to those questions differently. And it's all based on who you are, which is what we want. We want you to be who you are. So I tell you this because normally when we would do this, we would be in small groups and people would start to share. And I'm hoping that you will consider utilizing this as an exercise with your residents, because it's a great way to get them talking. Which leads me to my next slide, which is the importance of communication. You want to create an environment within your residence hall that people talk. And that's what I call dialogue. There is a huge difference between dialogue and debate. Debate is where I am trying to get you to listen to me because I want you to come to my side. I want you to agree with me. I want you to digest everything I'm saying so that you can change your opinions, your viewpoints, your values, and make them just like mine. That is not diversity. And that's why when we talk about communication, it's based on dialogue. Dialogue is not about changing another person. It's about understanding another person. So this is huge. When you're having conversations with your residents, when you're trying to create conversations amongst your residents and pull them together, sometimes it's literally just sitting down, asking a question, and then not saying another word. Silence. It's listening to what your question is, to what they're responding, and then just allowing other people to lean into that conversation. Dialogue is about being authentic. It's about being real. It's about being honest. So if somebody says something, say, I'm trying to understand that particular view more. Would you explain that further to me? Dialogue's about being patient. It's about being intentional and focusing on what that other person is saying. It's about taking responsibility. If I get angry or upset, saying, "Whoa, I gotta take a break. I gotta think about this." or I'm sorry I responded so strongly to what you just said, but I am really trying to process this. Because it may be something we're passionate about. It may be something that we've had an experience with and we just can't understand where that other person's coming from. So dialogue, it's always started with courage, and that's courage to ask learning questions, to share ideas, to share perspectives so that the conversation continues. These are the kinds of conversations that you want to facilitate in your residence hall. These are the things that shut down conversations. One is we minimize other people's comments or their differences. So somebody will bring something up, well, surely that didn't happen, or I can't believe you would say that because I've never been treated that way. What you're doing is you're telling that person that their story and their experience isn't real. And that's just not right. Then the person feels disrespected, they feel shut down, and furthermore, they're not going to continue the conversation. So be really careful about minimizing differences. And if you witness it where somebody else minimizes, turn to that person and say, wait a minute, let them finish their story. Or wait a minute, let's not interject our opinion. Let's let them talk. You can do that very clearly, very calmly, and make your point without judging, without talking down to them or making them feel guilty. But it's also a way that you affirm the person that's currently telling their story. Dialogue is also hindered by blind spots. And that's when we literally openly admit, I don't know what I don't know. I have no idea what you're talking about. And once again, that's okay because we don't know everything that there is to know about everything. So it's very important that we're honest with that. And we admit, you know what? I need some time to think about this. Or can we come back and talk about this further because this is totally new to me? Or can you continue telling me that so that I can learn more? Also, dialogue is hindered by performance culture, this dive that in order to have this conversation, we have to come to a solution at the end. That is the worst thing you can do. Many times an effective conversation has no solution. It has no end point. You just agree to disagree or agree to agree, and that you both have learned something because of the conversation. But sadly, so many times we start a conversation thinking that we have to have a solution, that we have to pull this person to our side, otherwise it's not successful. Well, what are you judging the effectiveness of? Is the effectiveness that they have to change to be like you, or is the effectiveness just the fact that you're trying to understand somebody else's view? If we make that our goal, wow, it is liberating. It is exceptional because then there's no pressure. We just literally get to listen to one another. The last thing is that dialogue is sometimes hindered by fear. Meaning, oh my gosh, if I contribute to this conversation, I may make it worse. I may say something that's offensive. They may take it, what I say, they may take it the wrong way. Maybe if I say something, I'm gonna risk losing a friendship. I'm gonna risk my leadership position. It could have a negative effect on if I want to be this position again next year in a residence hall. It may make me think. It may even challenge me to change a value or a belief system. There are a number of fears. I want to tell you a definition that I heard about fear many years ago that I loved. Fear is false evidence appearing real. Did you hear that? False evidence appearing real. Many times we feed ourselves with all of this false evidence saying, if I say something wrong, I'm going to get fired. If I say something wrong, I'm never going to have this position again. If I say something wrong, this person's going to walk away from me forever. So many times, all of those things are incorrect. If you have a friend, a really dear friend, they're going to talk you through the conversation. They may be angry, hurt, or offended, but they're not going to abandon you just because you've made one mistake. In employment, are you kidding me? If my employment as a diversity trainer was based on never making mistakes, I wouldn't have a job And I've been doing this now 35 years. So being a professional, being in a career, part of it is making mistakes. It's just what you do once you've identified those mistakes. And we've talked about that. Apologizing, continuing to ask questions, and moving on with the conversation. So don't allow fear to keep you from having dialogue, to keep you from communicating with one another. Dialogue is hindered by all of these things that I mentioned. And this comes from an article, a great article by William Isaacs on dialogue. So try to stay away from those particular things. This leads me to one point. I'm not going to stay here very long, but if we have dialogue and if we're really good at communicating to one another and listening to one another, the effect of that, the end result of that, is that we have a culture of civility. And it's extremely important that we have a civil campus, because in the midst of all of these differences, we've got to learn to get along. We've got to learn to be polite to one another, to agree to disagree, to listen to one another, to not interrupt one another in the middle of our sentences as we express our opinions. So when you think about coming to UCA, what are 5 things that you think that come to your mind when you envision a civil campus? What would UCA look like? What would it sound like? What behaviors would you witness coming onto this campus and thinking of it as a civil campus? I challenge you to, whatever those things are, that you exhibit those behaviors, that you make those things happen on this campus. Because once again, as a leader, as an employee on our campus in Housing and Residence Live, you contribute to the civility of our campus. And that's extremely important when it comes to respect for all of the people on our campus. So what do you do now? I'm going to leave you with some action steps, because I believe in educating. I believe in encouraging you for being who you are and for acknowledging what it is you're bringing in this leadership position. But I also believe in equipping you. So I just want to get you some things to think about. First of all, it begins with you. It's your responsibility to be intentional and to reach out and to learn about other people. Certainly in your classroom, you're going to be inspired and educated by your faculty members to seek diversity. But it's going to be up to you to seize those opportunities, to be intentional. And also it's up to you to model the behavior that you want others in your residence hall to model. So realize everyone influences someone, and you have an opportunity to influence your residents, the students in your classrooms, all of your peers in your extracurricular activities. So think about everything that you've learned through this module as well as the others, and ask yourself, what can I do to be a model of respect on this campus? Use casual conversations. I have brought this up so many times today. Use casual conversations to show other people the values of respect and inclusion. Start with the people that are immediately in your circle of influence, your peers and colleagues that are on staff with you, the residents that are surrounding you, the people in your classrooms. What learning questions can you ask? What things can you state to affirm people's identities and the groups and populations that they represent on campus? Oh my goodness, place yourself in diverse settings and people around you that are different from you. When you come to UCA, you are going to be amazed with the number of activities, programs, different music, different foods, different groups of people. Get out of your comfort zone and allow yourself to experience diversity. Remember what I told you, curiosity is the foundation of diversity. So go for it, be curious, and allow yourselves to be around a multitude of differences. And then identify those biases, identify those hot issues or trigger words. Be prepared if somebody says one of those trigger words. Trigger words, a word that somebody says or a behavior that someone does that immediately people have a response to. A trigger word could be Trump. A trigger word could be Hillary. A trigger word could be abortion, immigration, the Confederate flag. transgender. You hear these words and people immediately have somewhat of anxiety. Be ready, be prepared. How are you going to handle those trigger words? How are you going to handle if individuals start to get heated? Once again, point always back to people's identities make up who they are, and to affirm identities, even if we don't understand or agree. Create an environment where you let people know what the boundaries are. That in this residence hall, on this particular floor, we don't allow people to verbally attack one another. We don't allow certain terms that are disrespectful to a group of people. Let them know what the boundaries are from the very beginning, and let them know that we're in this together to learn from one another. So I thank you. I know you've been sitting there quite a while. I really appreciate the fact that you took the time to complete this course. Diversity is extremely important, and it's something that UCA treasures. Our mission statement is AVID, and the D for AVID is diversity. So our university is all about diversity, understanding and appreciating the differences and the similarities on our campus. We're excited for you as you enter the UCA culture, and I hope that you will experience everything and all that it has to offer. I leave you with a resource, and that is on our campus, there's a multitude of offices that want to be a resource for you as staff in Housing and Residence Life. I represent the Office of University Training. Once again, my name is Charlotte Strickland. I'm in Bernard Hall, Suite 207, and that is the phone number to our office. If at any time you have a question or need to be pointed to resources on campus, come and see me. I'd be glad to assist you. Within my office suite is the Office of Institutional Diversity that works with faculty as far as hiring, as far as recruiting, as part of promoting diversity with our senior administration. We also have the Office of Diversity and Community, which represents Latino students, African American students, and works with a number of programming on campus that helps with our minority populations. There's also the Disability Resource Center, which helps anyone with hidden as well as visible disabilities on our campus, whether a student needs help with testing or a student needs help as far as tutors or having a note-taking taken in a class. And then we have the Office of Veteran Services on our campus for all of those veterans who are returning to our college after serving for our country. These are just a few of the resources that I would like to highlight. We certainly have more. You'll be hearing from several resources through these modules as well as through your on-campus training as well. And my challenge to you is to utilize these resources, seek individuals out on this campus. We are here to assist you in what it is that you're doing on our campus. It's an extremely important job. So thank you once again for completing this course. I hope I get to meet you. Drop by my office in the fall, and I wish you the very best when it comes to your leadership experience and the opportunity that you have to impact lives. Go Bears!